Hi, I'm Matthew Schwartz with Information Security Media Group, and here at RSA, it is my pleasure to welcome to the ISMG studio, Kevin Lee, CISO of MUFG Securities Americas, and Rocco Grillo, Managing Director of Global Cyber Risk and Incident Response Investigation at Alvarez & Marsal. Gentlemen, it's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having me, Matt.
Always good to have you back. So, my theme today for both of you is a when, not if proposition. When, not if you're going to get attacked as an organization. I don't necessarily mean your organizations, but in general, it is something we see again and again. Organizations hoping they don't get hit, of course, they do get hit. And so the imperative, of course, is to build cyber resilience plans that work. On that front, Kevin, I know that you've been running incident response, or IR, tabletop exercises to help prepare yourself against this threat. What are some of the lessons you've been learning?
The main thing is kind of muscle memory and going through it. So making sure that the right people are notified, it's escalated, the right people know how to act. There's SLAs involved as far as when to, how quick to jump onto a call, how quick to kind of get responses, how quick to get resolution, keeping everyone notified. There's a lot of moving parts that kind of go hand in hand with it. But the main thing is it's all muscle memory. It comes down to identifying what the threat is or whatever the incident is, and then kind of trying to be proactive. But at the same time, when it's IR, it's more reactive. So.
I love that muscle memory. I think that gets to the practice being a virtue. Have there been any surprises as you've been doing this muscle memory sorts of stuff? Sometimes we hear about people maybe not having the phone numbers they need to have in a printable format, for example. It's basic sounding stuff and not difficult to ID if you go looking for it in advance.
Yeah, one of the challenges that we're seeing is kind of making sure that we're complying to regulations. There's certain time windows that you need to kind of notify certain regulators by. At the same time, there are kind of soft deadlines internally that, let's say, certain control groups want to get notified, and then they'll outreach to either law enforcement or regulators. So the main thing is it comes down to making sure that we are compliant. When does the clock start ticking, and making sure that we don't get fined. So
that's a powerful driver. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Excellent. And Rocco, tabletop exercises. How often should organizations be running these, do you think? Kevin, how often are you running them? So I've confused the two of you. And
it's all good. First? I think it really comes down to your risk posture. I'd say minimum, but it varies by the size of the organization, geographies, really as much as Kevin mentioned test and muscle memory. You really want to get into what's the system, what's the process. And when I say system, not necessarily a technical system. Think about how an organization operates, the different levels that are in place, the different types of organizations. If you've got subsidiaries, if you're a global organization, if you're across multiple geographies. But I think that piece around tabletop exercises is the backbone of cyber resilience. There's a number of different components. Kevin?
Yeah, like Rocco said, it depends on the size of the organization. For us, it's at least once a year. Could that change? It could change, but for the most part, right now, for the last 3 years, we've been doing it once a year. So,
excellent. Yeah. So I think with incident response, cyber resiliency, these are concepts that we were talking about a lot more. I think we're having a national discussion about it here in the United States, for example. Certainly abroad, there's a huge focus on resiliency because we've seen ransomware attacks. Just to pick one thing, a lot of organizations having difficulty recovering. Rocco, do you think we've been seeing a better understanding of the nuances involved in this? Are we having high enough level discussions? It's a broad question, but are things hopeful?
I think things are taking a step in the right direction. They're hopeful. Have we seen different pieces? I think recognition and respect for the impact of this at the executive level, the board level, no doubt has made some substantial movements. And I would say, the idea is this word cyber resilience, and again, I've been in the industry almost 20 years on the IT security, call it cybersecurity, and you've just watched it evolve from IT security to cybersecurity to cyber resilience to even now business resilience, business disruption, crisis management. And that's the piece that's pulling it all together. It has really underscored, obviously, cyber attacks, incidents are not an IT or security issue only, quickly becomes a business issue in the blink of an eye or almost in parallel. And those are the pieces that companies really want to embrace, that idea of cyber resilience. You can't stop attacks from happening, but it's the idea of being proactive, being better prepared. And I want to go back to Kevin's point about test and muscle memory, but those are the very things. Test the muscle memory, whether it's an exercise, likewise, if it's an actual incident. It's not the end of the world if a company suffers an incident. The more important thing is, how well in advance did we detect it? How quickly will we be able to respond, contain it, recover it, and limit the damages? Those are some of the pieces that really come out of this term cyber resilience.
So I know a lot of CISOs like to talk people, process, technology.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about resilience, are there any, when you're talking with other CISOs, is there any people, process, technology angles, challenges, things that are made easier perhaps that you might highlight?
Sure. I mean, being at the RSA conference, you're dealing with a lot of vendors, right? So that from a tool perspective, people, process, technology, there's plenty of technology out there. It comes down to having the right people, bringing on the right people, hiring the right people, and also maturing your process to kind of making sure that all three kind of work harmoniously together. You can have the greatest technology implemented wrong, and guess what? It's a dud. You can have a good process, good technology, and the people managing it are not up to par, and guess what? That's another dud, right? You can have great people, great technology, and the process is kind of half-baked. So I think all three of them have to be kind of at the same level, if not better, to kind of work together well in order to have a sound information security program.
So as a CISO, again, talking with your peers, what are some of the essential conversations that you need to be having in advance of this? And we'll get to the CEO angle, of course, as well, perhaps.
I think one of the topics that we've been talking about is finding the right talent. I think right now, maybe it's COVID, maybe I don't know what it is, but finding the right people, the right talent has been a big challenge. I don't know if you're seeing the same thing on your side, but it's just, there's a lot of great people, or there's a lot of not so great people, and then the price tag that comes along with it. It's a mixed bag right now. So it's taken us at least probably anywhere between 2 to 4 months to fill one open role sometimes. So.
Which obviously can complicate attempting to run things, respond
Correct.
to incidents,
Yeah.
Stay ahead of the problem.
Bridging the gap and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
okay, excellent.
I was going to say on that, Matt, it's really a team sport at all levels. You can have the most talented expertise from a technical and security expertise standpoint, but you really need to have it laid out across all ends. And when I say a team sport, IT and security as well as the business, key stakeholders, executive leadership team, and guess what? Even the board of directors are in the game now. It's no longer just about your incident response plan, communications, escalation, collaboration, making the executive team aware. When you get into things like ransomware, business disruption, affecting your business partners, the outside world, it's no longer just making the executive team aware of it and letting a CISO or CIO organization tell them, here's what's going on, here's what we're doing. The executives, the board needs to step in and make critical decisions in the direction that we're going to go. Those are some of the pieces, again, to your point on cyber resilience. On the one hand, that can sound like just a generic buzzword term that everyone's throwing out. Same thing with an incident response plan. But let's take a step back. What's the purpose of that tabletop? We're testing the muscle memory of our incident response plan. Well, our plan is there. One size doesn't fit all. And what we encourage clients to do, and we're helping them, is what are your most critical assets? And you would be shocked. It's not just that system there or that server. Yes, if that goes down, it would impact a company. But what are the real critical assets of a company? The Achilles heel. So really, before you jump into doing a tabletop exercise, before you're going to have your plan, have we conducted our cybersecurity risk assessment? Do we know what our most critical assets are? The controls or the lack thereof. And those are the ones that you want to really weave in to your incident response plan. Of course, your plan wants to be holistic and cover most things, but what is going to be that Achilles heel? And that is what you're going to test. If there's an attack on that critical asset that'll bring the company to its knees, even if it's a remote possibility, if it can bring the company to its knees, disrupt the business, you want to test that through. And what's our plan if that happens?
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned senior leadership, and I just, as a final note, want to emphasize that with your practicing, obviously once you get to the point where you are practicing and you're getting that muscle memory, oftentimes it's CEOs having to make difficult decisions in clutch situations, correct? And so you need to equip them, I suppose, with the warning at least that this might be happening.
I would tell you on that front, Matt, over, I'd say 5, 10 plus years ago, we've really come a long way, because it used to be a tabletop exercise would be run towards IT, security operations, maybe a CIO or CISO would be the senior most person, and you'd start to see legal come into the mix, maybe different sides of the business, crisis communications, corporate communications for disclosures. But now more than ever, you've got the IT and security operations conducting the testing, management, including CISOs, CIOs, legal, the executive team, especially public companies. You look at some of the things that the SEC is imposing and the latest proposed policies,
guidelines, regulations,
that are coming into place. The boards not only need to be notified, but more so, they've got a fiduciary responsibility to make sure we've got our critical assets, we've got our plan, and we've tested it, that if this happens, and again, the same way, whether it's a real incident or you're testing your plan, finding gaps during a tabletop exercise is a win, because it sure beats finding a gap in the middle of a fire or a crisis.
Yeah. I think it's the CISO's job to kind of call out and help the CEO or the COO make those difficult decisions. It's not, so like as Rocco said, it shouldn't be the CISO making all of the actual decisions, because we can only kind of advise or opine on certain things that we have control over. Certain things that are out of our control, with maybe kind of business impact and all that, that is, I would say, our job to kind of call it out and say, Mr. CEO, Mr. COO, Mr. Chief Compliance Officer, here are your options. What do you want to do? And then have them kind of, be the general that calls that order out.
But equipping them with what they need to make the decision, which is hopefully the right one.
It comes down to kind of and explaining in layman terms. If you're going to talk bits and bytes, it might just go right over their head, right? So at the same time, you want to kind of put it in business terms, business risk. Here's what's happening. Here's why you should care about it. Here are your options. What do you want to do? So
fantastic. Well, gentlemen, it's always a pleasure to talk cyber resiliency, business resiliency increasingly now. Kevin, Rocco, thanks so much for your time and insights today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. It was my pleasure.
Same.
I'm Matthew Schwartz with Information Security Media Group. Thank you for joining us.